So 2 examples of how Kiva is crowdsourcing. And finally, if you have a leading public platform and you can really get the integrity of data right, then you have the opportunity to build something what I call increasing returns on data. And let me talk about kind of 2 companies in particular. eBay. eBay, about 15 years old now. When they started, you didn't know if that random person in Kansas was trustworthy. But today, that random person in Kansas actually has a feedback score, right? Like, 100 plus positive, 100%, a yellow star. Amazon, there's this huge long tail of books that don't exist in your bookstore. So maybe, I don't know, 10%, 5% of all books that are published get a New York Times book review, and that someone can actually write about it. But Amazon actually stores user reviews. And so that really arcane book that just a small group of people are interested in, you can actually find that community of users who've read that book and reviewed that book, and that will persist into history. And that just makes Amazon and companies like eBay so much more valuable over time. Kiva realizes that right now in development, and particularly microfinance, information, the information asymmetries, oftentimes the lack of transparency, it actually holds people back from doing good. We believe that there's actually a lot of money that people want to invest, for example, in microfinance, but people don't know how to actually find the right one. So what we try to do is each microfinance institution, each organization, some of them are really small, recent NGOs that just got started. We just funded, for example, 2 guys out of Stanford that started an organization in Ecuador, 2 undergrads. That didn't go so well. We lost about $450,000 on the site, but it was an interesting experiment and we've captured it. We've memorialized it on the site so someone else doesn't make that same mistake, but we can learn from it. And so what we're trying to do is create a big public database of NGOs or microfinance institutions and keep score around risk. And that way, the hope here is that there might be a small organization in South Sudan that isn't on the radar screen of Citigroup or Gates Foundation because they're really quite small. But over kind of 3 years of good performance data on Kiva, they can basically establish their creditworthiness as an organization and attract other funders so that they can lend to more of the folks in their community. Longer term, this is really aspirational for Kiva, but what we see lacking is kind of, just like here in the US, there are credit bureaus that each one of us has a credit score, and that allows us to basically get credit at a very different price point. One day, for example, if you look at Maria in Nicaragua, if she ever immigrates from, say, the village to the city, she would actually lose all of her reputation with that local microfinance institution, and basically she'd have to start all over and start with a very small loan. But if she could point one day to the Kiva website and go into the internet cafe and say, I've received 4 loans via Kiva and I've paid all 4 of them back, if she ever migrates, basically her creditworthiness actually stays with her. And so the opportunity, if we can continue to build kind of a database with integrity to create a credit bureau for the developing world, I think this is something that could be really exciting long term. And then beyond actually just kind of risk, one of the things that I think we could do is actually start getting into the world of social performance measurement and publish a Kiva social rating. So just like we have kind of a lot of risk data, what's the trade-off and how do we actually differentiate? How do you differentiate when you visit the site if this loan is actually going to a person who will get additional services like business training, healthcare, or if it's just basically going to, just a pure credit with kind of less wraparound services. So that's a little bit about kind of Kiva and what we intend to do about kind of creating a system where there's increasing returns on data. And right now it's only 3.5 years old, but I think over the next 5, 10, 50 years, the database could be quite valuable. So 4 pieces of advice as you start your social adventure, and then I'll conclude. The first is, one of the mistakes I think I made early on, and I spent a lot of time, as you can tell, doing PowerPoint, because that was probably what I was really good at, and doing Excel, to try to prove what the projections would be. And I think one of the great things that the founders of Kiva did is they just built a website. And so my big thing is traction, not projections. There's going to be a lot of pressure right now to build business plans and really kind of think about your pitch decks. And I think you can always try to get that just perfect, but really focus on your program activities and do anything it takes to get that traction, because ultimately that's what counts and that's what inspires people to come and support you. So really focus on traction, not projections. We spend a lot of time early on doing projections, probably too much time, and in retrospect, we should have focused more on just the things that really mattered. Second is, when it's really small, when it's just you, this adage, I learned this one at PayPal, and I think it really works for me. Nothing works unless you do. So, you know, I don't know, people who are perfectionists who really want to get every single thing right. But you know, right now, the problems and the arenas that you're playing in, the problems are so immense, and they're so speed is so important that I think kind of trying to always kind of remember, you know, where does it matter for me to be perfect versus just me actually just moving on and addressing the next issue, and getting okay with being less than perfect. Sometimes allows you to move faster and scale faster. And finally, I talked a little bit about Kiva and our early days when really no one was coming to the website. We had about 1 month of payroll in the bank, and then we got, quite frankly, lucky that the Nobel Peace Prize announcement went to Muhammad Yunus. And then we just happened to be this website that lets you become a microlender. And so what I would say is, try to basically keep your burn rate low. Try to really figure out ways that you can survive without paying yourself and your team very much money, and stay alive until that serendipity strikes. And while you're staying alive, you know, if you're learning that, you know what, this isn't taking off at the rate I thought it was taking off, change, evolve. Prior to Kiva, when I worked at PayPal, PayPal first started as a Palm Pilot encryption company. You know, they basically realized that's not really working, and they evolved it to an internet payment company. And that wasn't really working until they found eBay, and they grew in that petri dish. And so figure out kind of how you can kind of evolve, keep your burn rate really low, and hopefully, you know, someone will come along or some force will come along and really help you hit that scale, or other people will join along as well. So those are some pieces of advice from me. I'd love to take your questions right now. Thanks for having me.